This is the Flux Labs Nova. This little blaster blew my mind, but not for the reasons you're probably thinking. So towards the end of the last year, I can't remember exactly when, me and Paper Skeletons sent Flux Labs a couple of nailers for them to review and get a feel for them and let us know any feedback that we needed to hear to improve the product, etc. In return, Dr. Flux completely surprised me and Paper Skeletons. He packed 2 of his original Nova blasters and sent them to us. I finally found proper time to become acquainted with the blaster, learn all the ins and outs of it, did a couple of little remixes on certain parts, more on that later, but overall, I want to talk about connection to this blaster and why it's so important. This exchange that Dr. Flux did with us reminded me one of the reasons why I like this hobby so much. So I like to think of this hobby having 5 major areas. There's obviously the 3D designers, there is the modders and tinkerers, the guys that do all the kinds of integrations and interesting creative modifications to their blasters. There is the creator space, where on platforms like YouTube and TikTok, guys create videos either for review purposes or strictly entertainment. There is the strict cinematic and entertainment portion of the hobby. It's a little bit more distinguished and casual. Channels like PDK Films and Aaron Esser's, movies like that you guys may have seen at some point in the past. And of course, there's always the actual pro tournament and casual gameplay portion of the hobby, where people engage in their local events. Maybe they upload the videos of those said events, but they're active members of the community with boots on the ground, either organizing these events or attending them and then spreading the word about them to get more people involved. I try to get as involved in all of these areas of the hobby as I can. Even though my skills are kind of limited when it comes to 3D design, I'm still a little green in that area. I still try my best to just get involved because it's exciting. I find it interesting, and I love engaging with the people in the space because I feel like I can learn so much from them. They have a wealth of knowledge. When I first got the Nova, I immediately tested it, and there was a few things that needed alignment. That just happens with any blaster, especially PLA. Here in Florida with the heat, some things, especially flywheel cages, where you depend on that in order to get you depend on it having to be a perfect print in order to get a perfect shot, things like that. But we worked around it and it was no big deal. But what I really like about this blaster is it's an original design. Now, it's easy to remix and create a version of another blaster that's very popular. For example, even me and Paper Skeletons, when we designed the nailer and now the nailer brushless and the nailer N1, which is the PWM version, these are all kind of pseudo spin-offs of the original Griffin. Like the saying says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The Griffin is an amazing, reliable platform. I hope to continue seeing remixes of it, to be honest. Now they have the Protein, which is already getting remixes. Another great platform. Shout outs to Flagonio for these awesome designs. But every once in a while, you see an original design, something that is grassroots, not related to anything in particular. It might look like something else by coincidence. Like, for example, a lot of people have told me that this blaster looks like the Juno from Out of Darts. It has maybe some resemblance. I just like how the designer not only created an architectural marvel with the design of this blaster, but they also implemented a lot of multicolor elements to the ultimate design. And I thought that that's a nice and beautiful touch because, number one, you can't just do it with any printer. The best way to do it is with a printer that's equipped with AMS or a multi-material, multicolor system that can do all this automatically. But if you do it manually, we're talking about days, maybe even weeks if you have an old enough printer. A lot of work and design went into this. I just like it because it feels like a collection piece. It feels like something that reminds me of all the hours that somebody put into this design, and it's just beautiful. Also, I really like the aesthetic. It has this pseudo retro yet at the same time futuristic kind of look. I fell in love with it right away. Extra angled initial grip. If you don't like those kind of grips, maybe you won't vibe with it, but I found myself adapting to it quite easy. It has a mag release where you pull back instead of push forward. I kind of like that. There's plenty of room for my fingers to fit in here. It doesn't gravity drop. It's friction fit, but the detent vent is soft enough with the included springs that you can treat it as a pure friction fit. You don't have to always use this. It's there in case there's other mags that are slightly oversized, maybe from another brand, and they fit a little tight that they won't friction release on their own. You can always hit that lever and get your mag out. It's just little details like that that make you really appreciate it. I like the fact that they didn't make it asymmetrical, even though they could have. They could have just made this little area here for the motors wide, and then this part made it flush, but instead what they did is they made both parts have this little flare right here. I really appreciate that. For example, I upgraded the original Valkyrie motors that came with this Nova. I'm pretty sure you can order it with whatever motors you want, but I had 132s laying around from Worker. I popped them in here for that extra torque. This flywheel does have a very nice high crush flywheel cage, and they come with my favorite flywheels, the Worker Smooths. I have no complaints on those. We run them in our staplers, and it just runs great. I'll show you a little bit of footage on the kind of performance we were getting, but one thing I really like about the blaster, and like I said in the beginning of the video, one thing that had me hooked immediately is not the kind of thing you would expect somebody to become addicted to a blaster for. Most people are crazy about accuracy. Most people are crazy about FPS. Yes, the blaster has both of those and a pretty decent amount. However, it's the consistency. We're gonna get to the FPS footage now in a little bit, but holy moly, the consistency of this blaster was crazy. And those are the little things that you do not understand how important it is until you're out in the field and you're depending on it. The fact that this blaster can do that was highly appreciated. Also, the versatility of power systems that you can run in this blaster. I was able to fit my 2S Li-ion, my 3S Li-ion. I was able to fit my small micro 3S LiPo. There's a really cheap alternative to buying these outright. You guys may have seen it on a short that I posted a while back where you can get these 3S water gun LiPos and completely convert them to Nightingale batteries. I was able to use that on here. And of course, Paper Skeletons 3D offers 2 battery door options for the PWM usage on the Nova. I actually got a little creative and I developed my own version. This version right here, which has the connector facing straight back. Paper Skeletons is developing a version of this one that actually has a surface mount connector terminal. This one's more like a friction fit, but I made it so that it will never come loose. The other versions have the connector coming straight in at an angle here or at an angle this way. So depending on your needs, your equipment, your loadout, what you have on your person, if you need the cable a little bit more further away from you, you might want the 90-degree connector that just puts the cable straight outside the side of the blaster. If you have a little bit more room, you could always put it angled. And if you just want it flush because you don't want it catching on anything, you could always have it coming straight out the back, like the design that I implemented recently. Coming back to the aesthetics of the blaster, it's just an exotic piece of art, first and foremost. And then it's a blaster and a great little primary. So if you're into style, if you're into something that you just love to admire, to look at, a shelf piece where you could just set it up on the thing. I'm pretty sure you guys have seen it in the background here in a lot of my videos. This blaster does come with the Flux Labs blaster stand, which is a great little addition to such a pretty blaster that looks so great when it's on display. Thank you, Flux Labs, for thinking about collectors when you decided to include that. I've recently also become a big fan of these little snub type muzzles. You might have already caught on to this, but this is not how the blaster looks when you bring it out of the bag. Flux Labs has their original design of flash hider. They have one with the vents and they have one that's also solid depending on how you request it to be made. I developed a version that is flush with the body and its body width, and I believe it looks really, really nice and complements the overall aesthetic of the blaster. I may or may not develop a P-car version, but the blaster shoots pretty well as is. I'll have to do some testing and see how much it adds or takes away in order to make that decision. But if you do take possession of a Nova and you would like to have a snub muzzle versus the stock one, I may have something here in the near future available on the Etsy store or printables. We'll figure it out. Other than that, performance is great, as you were able to see. 135 consistent with the 3S LiPo and a crazy 125 with the 2S Li-ion. The 3S Li-ion and the 3S LiPo were getting similar results and a marginal increase with the full-blown 40C big pack 3S LiPo. Just consistency is the name of the game. I'm really happy with it. I'd highly recommend something like this if you like having a primary that's compact, buttery smooth, mechanical semi-automatic, no issues there. Overall, great little blaster. Very well balanced. I like the cage that they put in here. The flywheels seem to spin at a very harmonically sounding balance. I really appreciate that. I believe you can get these at Xbox Games. I think that's the distributor that Dr. Flux is using. I don't know if he's selling them directly yet. I don't even know if he has an Etsy store yet. I think he's working on something like that, but if he does, I'll definitely put the link in the description. I also heard from a little bird that he's gonna be releasing the files on Colts 3D. So if you guys have a printer in your possession, it might not be a bad idea to get one of these suckers and print yourself one. I'm definitely loving mine. I appreciate you guys watching. If you enjoyed this video, you're definitely gonna like this one. I'll catch you on the next one. Stay blasting, foam fam.